In this example, I want to go ahead and take a look at gesture recognizers and a couple in specific. So the first one I want to look at is the pan gesture recognizer, and we'll look at that in two different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new Xcode project, and I'm going to make it an app, and I'm just going to call this gesture recognizers, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. And the idea with this is I'm going to not work with an iPod Touch. I'm going to work with an iPhone 11. And we're looking at an iPhone 11. What I want to do is I want to go to the internet and I want to get kind of a file image that I can have on the screen and then a trash can so that I can enable drag and drop. Okay, so I'm going to go out and do a Google search for a couple of image icons. So a file, image, icon, PNG. And I'm doing a Google image search for it. And the idea would be that I'm just going to take this Word document here. So I want this image. I'm going to save the image as, and I'm going to save it as file.png to my desktop. And then I'm going to do the same thing for trash image icon. And again, I'm looking for a PNG file. So I'm going to grab this one, save image as, and I'm just going to call it trash.png. Okay, so those are the two files that I want to bring into my project. So in order to bring them into my project, I'm going to go to my assets folder and I'm going to drag them in. So from my file system, I have trash and I have file, and I'm going to bring them into my project. So I'm just dragging them into my project, and then I have those two files. And then what I want to do on my storyboard, I'm going to change the background color. So the background color right now is white. I'm going to make it light gray. And then I'm going to add two UI image views to the storyboard. So the first one is just going to go in the top left. And that image is going to be the file. And I can resize it so it's exactly the size of the file. I'm just resizing it a little bit so it looks okay. And then I want another UI image view that I'll bring onto the storyboard that I'm going to put in the bottom left. And that's going to be my trash can. And again, just resizing it a little bit so it looks okay. That looks reasonable to me. And this is kind of the setup for our user interface. What I want to be able to do, so just kind of the setup of this example with gesture recognizers, is I want to be able to drag this file image around the phone and be able to move it, so kind of drag and drop functionality. And then eventually I want to be able to say, you know, if I'm dragging and dropping this, if I'm dragging it around and it happens to intersect with this trash can, then I want it to actually move to the trash. Okay, and I want it to disappear. So in order to do that, I have to do a couple of things. So first thing is I have to, and this is a critical step that I often forget, this interaction, I have to have user interaction enabled in order for this to work. So this checkbox over here, I have to have user interaction enabled. And then I'm going to need references to these two image views. So I'm going to bring up my assistant editor so I can create those IB outlets to the image views. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up my assistant editor. That's not really what I wanted. I want the assistant editor for this view controller. And again, not really what I wanted. I want the assistant editor, sorry. There's the assistant editor. And then I'm going to control drag from the file down to the view controller to create an outlet. So I'm creating a UI image view, and I'm going to call that my file image view. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this trash can, and I'm going to call it my trash image view. I'm going to connect that outlet. Okay, so that gives me a reference to both of those controls. And then I can go ahead and close the assistant editor. So the outlets are created. What I want to do is I want to do this programmatically first. We can do it from Interface Builder, and we will do it from Interface Builder. But for this first example, I want to programmatically add these gesture recognizers. Okay, so in the view controller code is where I'm going to add the code to set up the gesture recognizer. Okay, so I'm going to have a function that's called add pan gesture. And the way this add pan gesture is going to work is I'm going to take in a view, and it's going to be a UI view, which is a UI image view. And I don't have a return value, so the return type is going to be non-existent, and then my function body will be right here that I will fill in the blanks. So I want to add this pan gesture recognizer. Okay, so the idea would be that I'm going to create a new UI pan gesture recognizer. And when I do that, the constructor is going to take a target and an action. Okay, so the target is going to be this view controller, this class definition. So it's going to be self. And then the action should be the function that's going to get triggered when we are actually panning. So the function that's going to be set up so that we can actually pan around and move the image around. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this. For now, I'm just going to leave it blank. So I have that pan gesture recognizer. Eventually I have to fill in that function that's going to get triggered when the panning actually happens, but for now I'm going to leave it blank. And then the view that is passed in, so this view that gets passed in, I'm going to add a gesture recognizer, so add gesture recognizer. And then the gesture recognizer that I want to add is pan. And I don't know why my cursor went up there. Okay, so that's going to add that gesture recognizer to our view. Okay, so then the way we're describing this is what I want to do is I want to make this file image view to be able to be dragged and dropped. So this file image view is really the control that's going to have that pan gesture recognizer. Okay, so if I go back to my view controller, when I'm adding this pan gesture, and I'm adding the pan gesture recognizer, I'm doing that to my file image view right here. Okay, so I'm going to have some code in the view did load. I'm going to call this add pan gesture. It's asking for a view. The view that I want to be able to pan with is this file image view. Okay, so I've added that gesture recognizer. And now we can go ahead and take care of this selector. Okay, so to actually handle the panning and moving around and stuff like that, I'm going to want a function that does that. So the function that I want to do that is going to be handle pan. So I'm going to go ahead and have a function called handle pan. And the parameters that it's going to take is a UI pan gesture recognizer. So I'm just going to call that the sender. And then there's going to be no return type. So this is the function that's going to get triggered as the user is dragging and dropping that file. Okay, and in order for me to actually set that up so that this is the function that handles that, this selector now has to be defined. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that selector and actually fix it. So the way this is going to work, the syntax is a little bit tricky here, so I'm going to define a selector. And then within the selector, I have a parentheses, and the method that I want is from this view controller. So I'm naming the method view controller dot handle pan, and I'm sending in the sender. Okay, and it's going to complain saying that in order to do that, I have to expose this method through Objective-C, or I can say that this is an IB action. And I think that should take care of it. Okay, so this has to be an interface builder action in order for that selector to work. Okay, so now the way this will work is if I try to drag and drop that file, this handle pan function should get called on our image view, and we should be able to see that by me just saying print handling pan. And obviously I'm not handling the pan gesture recognizer right now. I'm just putting this print statement in here, and we're not actually going to be able to drag and drop, but you can see that this function is actually going to get triggered as a result of me trying to drag and drop that image. So I'm going to go ahead and build it and try to run it. It's going to take a second to launch my virtual device. And once my virtual device is launched, then I try to drag and drop. So I'm clicking and dragging, and you can see that it's triggering this handle pan function many times. Okay, so I just tried to drag and drop, and it handled it many times. And what's going to happen is that handle pan function is getting sent this sender, which is the UI pan gesture recognizer, and that pan gesture recognizer is going to have various states set up as an enumerated type. So the ones that we care about is when you begin panning, so when you begin the drag and drop, as it changes, we want to be able to track how the file or how that image should move around, and then finally when it ends. So those are the different states that we have to keep track of in order for this to work. Okay, so what we're going to do is, this function's getting triggered now, so we're good there. We're going to need a reference to the state. So we're going to do a switch statement on the state, and the sender.state is what we're actually looking for. And there's a couple of states that we care about. So when we begin, when we change, and when we end. So when we begin and change, we're not going to handle it any differently. So we're going to have .began and .changed. And then we'll have some code here. Okay, and for now I'm just going to put a break. And then we need another case for when we ended, and we'll also break there. And in the default we'll break. Okay, so this is our switch statement. And now we can start to fill in the details of how we're going to actually make this change. Okay, so we're in charge of actually moving that UI image view around, that file image view. Okay, so in theory, when we add this pan gesture recognizer, we're passing in a generic view. So we know that it's the file image view that we're using to keep track of our pan gesture recognizer. So I could hard code it, but ideally what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that object from the sender, which is this UI pan gesture recognizer. So I'm going to have pan view equal to sender.view. Okay, and it's saying, hey, you're never using that. Okay, I will eventually, because that's the view that I actually want to move around. Okay, in our case, since we only have one view that can move, we know that it's this file image view, but we don't want to hard code it because we have this function that's generically set up that'll take any view that's going to allow us to pan around. So I'm just calling it the pan view. Okay, so then what I need to do is I have to figure out how far did this view actually move, like X and Y coordinates. And if we're going back to our storyboard, the way these X and Y coordinates work is, like if I'm looking at a graph, we kind of make a T, and we have X and Y coordinates. So with iOS, the X and Y coordinates are 0, 0 up in the top left corner, and we can move along the X-axis in a positive way and the Y-axis as well. So what I'm going to do is I want to know what the translation is. How far did that image move in reference to XY coordinates? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called translation. And the way I'm going to get that translation is how much did it move. I'm going to go to the sender.translation, so that UI pan gesture recognizer has a translation in the view. So the view that we're looking for is self.view. So in the UI, or in this view controller's view, the main view, how far did that image view actually move? Okay, so we have those two variables. We have the pan view and then the translation. And what that's going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to start moving the pan view around based on the translation. Okay, so the way we want to do this is we want to say the pan view's center is going to move around. And the way the pan view center is going to move around is it's going to move around based on the translation. So it's going to be the pan view dot center. Sorry, the center is actually a CG point, an X and Y coordinate. So we really want this one right here. And the X is going to be our pan view dot center dot X plus our translation dot X. And then the Y is going to be the same thing. So pan view dot center dot X, or sorry, dot Y plus the translation's Y. Okay, so we're able to move the center around. And CG float must be unwrapped. So our pan view right now is optional, and I don't want to make it an optional. Sender.view is optional. So I'm going to make it not optional because we have a view. So I'm just going to force unwrap that pan view, and then we'll have our center X and center Y. Okay, and then once I've done that move, so I've moved my view, I have to reset the translation. So I've already moved the file image, and that's what this changing of the center does, is it actually moves that image. And then once I do that, the translation has to be reset back to 0 so that we're no longer moving around. There is no translation within the view anymore because we've already accounted for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say sender, which is the UI pan gesture recognizer, set translation, and it's asking for a CG point, so we want to reset it to 0 in our view, which is going to be self.view again. Okay. And at this point, I'm not coding the ended or anything like that. We should just, at this point, we should be able to see that file image moving around the screen. Okay, that's the goal, is that we're handling the translation. Okay, so now if I run this, we should be able to take this image, and you can see how I'm moving it around the screen. Okay, so I can drag and drop it around the screen, and life's good. You'll notice that when I drag and drop it, it goes behind the trash can as opposed to on top of the trash can. So if I want to drag it, typically I would drag and drop on top of the trash can. There's two ways to fix this. So I could fix it through code. I could fix it through Interface Builder. And the way I'd fix it through the interface builder is when I look at this view controller scene, the file image comes after the trash image, and that's what's going to determine the hierarchy, the view hierarchy. A better way to handle this, though, is to fix the z index right here in the view did load. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to self.view.bring subview to front, and the subview that I want in the front is the file image view. So I'm bringing that subview to the front, and now what it'll do is it'll actually fix that behavior of having this file image view fall behind our trash can. Okay, so now you'll notice that it's in front of the trash can and things are working the way we'd expect them to work. Okay? Okay, so our next phase of this is when this drag and drop ends. Okay, so when the drag and drop ends, what we want to do is we want to determine, did I actually drag and drop it onto the trash can? Because if I did, then I want to fix that. Okay, and by fix that, I want to actually trigger what would look like a delete. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it so that we just make that trash can, or I'm sorry, that file image disappear. Okay, so the way we're going to handle that is we're just going to say if the pan view dot frame intersects, and we're asking if it intersects with the trash image views frame. If it does, then it's time to remove that pan view, which is our file at this point. So pan view dot alpha is equal to 0.0. Okay, so now if we run this, what's going to happen is we can drag this. It's not intersecting, not intersecting, not intersecting. Finally, we're intersecting, and you'll notice that that alpha gets set to 0. And it's kind of abrupt. What I want to do is I want to animate that process so that it looks like it's fading out. Okay, and the way we're going to handle that is we're going to do a UI view.animate with duration. So that I'm going to take half a second to do this. And then the animations that I want, I'm just hitting enter here, and it'll automatically put in a closure. So it puts me in a function that I can actually write some code. So I want to animate this code. Okay, so pretty straightforward code. We're just going to fade out over a half second, and that'll smooth out the removal of that file image view. Okay, so now, again, I can drag and drop this all over the place. But then once I intersect with the trash can, you'll notice that it fades out over a half second. Okay. One other nice thing that I might want to do is I might want to have this snap back. So as I'm dragging and dropping that file image view, I might want it to snap back into place if I didn't drag it onto the trash can. So in order to do that, I might want to know what the origin is. So I'm going to have a variable called file image view origin, which is going to be a CG point. And I do not want it to be optional. And the way I'm going to get that file image view origin is right here. Sorry, file image view origin. I want to assign it equal to the file image view dot frame dot origin. Okay, so I have that as a class level variable. So basically that's the starting point of where that file image view is loaded. So when I load my storyboard and I see the screen initially, this file image view, I just set the origin. So as the view did load, I set that file image view origin to the original location. Okay, so what I want to do now is I have it so that if we're intersecting, we're going to remove that pan view image. Otherwise, if it doesn't intersect, we don't want to delete it. What we want to do is we want to snap it back into place. So I'm going to do the same kind of thing, UI view animate with duration over a ½ second. The animations that I want are going to be, I want to take the pan view and I want the frames origin set back to the original origin, which is the file image view origin. And that's going to animate back. Since I'm inside of a closure, I can't access this instance variable without referencing self explicitly, so I have to have this self dot here to fix that. Okay, so now when I run this, okay, so now I can drag it, and if I don't land on the trash can, you'll see it snaps back into place. Okay, life's good. But if I do intersect that trash can now with that image, what'll happen is this image will fade out. Okay. And then I want to add one more feature to this. So I want to add one more feature to this example. So I'm going over to the storyboard, and it's really tough to demo this without a reset button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a reset button. And the idea with the reset button is I'm going to go ahead and bring up the assistant editor so I can set up an action for it. So right here at the bottom of the class, I'm going to have a reset, view state. And we're getting that from a UI button. And the idea here is that I want to have that file image view dot alpha back to 1. And then I want to reset the origin, which is the file image view dot frame dot origin equal to my file image view's origin. And I probably should do this first. I want to move it back before I make it visible. Okay, so I go ahead and run this. And I can drag this around and it'll snap back, just like we'd expect. But if I drag it over the trash can and the views, the frames intersect, then it's going to fade away. And it's fading away, and it's basically fading it away by making it invisible, but it still exists right here kind of within the frame. So when I hit reset, what I do is I reset the frame back to the origin and I reset the alpha to 1 so that I can drag and drop it again. Okay, so then it just makes it visible again. So we can reset back to the original state. Okay. So this is the first example that I wanted to look at. And I think it's kind of an interesting example. The second example that I want to look at is rotation and scaling. In order for that to happen, I want to just deal with one image. So I don't necessarily want to change this demo too much. So we saw how I can programmatically add a gesture recognizer. What I want to do now is I want to use the graphical tools to add a gesture recognizer. Okay, so the graphical tools are going to allow me to add a gesture recognizer kind of the same way where I'm triggering some actions. So in order to demo that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another view controller to the scene. So we'll have another view controller here. This view controller is going to be my startup view controller. So this is going to be the initial view controller. So when I run this, you'll see that This is the view controller that actually gets rendered. And in order for this to successfully work, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and add a new file. And it's going to be a Cocoa Touch class that's derived from view controller. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this IB for Interface Builder Gesture Recognizer view controller. And I'm just going to save it in the project directory. And then what I can do in my storyboard is I can then link that view. So I can say that this view controller is of type IB gesture recognizer view controller. And if I run this right now, I'm going to get a white screen because that's the initial view controller. Okay, so this is not very exciting. This is kind of my working demo as of right now. Okay, so just to make sure things are working, I'm going to go ahead and change the background color. So from white to teal. And you'll see when I start this up that the application's actually teal. Okay, so we're there. I want to go back to kind of the same setup where I have my file that I want to be able to drag around. So in order to do that, I'm going to have an image view. But I don't necessarily want to drag and drop this image view into the trash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that that image is that file. Okay, and I'm going to scale down the size just so we're edge to edge here so that there's no space that's taken up by the image that is not used. Okay, so I have this file image, and I'm going to need a reference to that file image. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up the assistant editor again. Okay, again, don't need the comment there, don't need any setup. I need a reference to this file image view, so I'm going to control drag over to that view controller, and I'm going to call that my file image view again. Okay, that's my reference. So there's my reference. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to have a function called handle pan. Okay, so I want to do the same thing where I'm handling that pan gesture recognizer. So I'm going to go ahead and have an IB action. It's going to be a function called handle pan that takes in a UI pan gesture recognizer. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to have some code here saying that we're panning. Okay, so this is the function that I want to get triggered. We had set this all up manually so that that file image view, we added the pan gesture recognizer, and then we had the selector that said, you know, this is the function that's going to handle that panning process of moving the record around. In this case, we're going to do that a little bit differently. So we're going to go to the storyboard, and we're going to do that all through Interface Builder now. Okay, so the way I want to do this is if I go over to my objects, there's going to be a pan gesture recognizer. So you can see that pan gesture recognizer. I'm going to drag and drop it onto the file image view. Okay, so now that pan gesture recognizer, if I look, you can see the connection. It's connected to the file image view because I dragged and dropped it on top. Okay, so that's how the relationship is created. Then, once I have that, I can control drag in the scene from the pan gesture recognizer to the view controller. So I'm control dragging to the view controller, and it's going to say, what actions do you want to handle? And remember, I set up that IB action. That's what makes it visible here. So that handle pan with sender. So now when I pan around with this image, that function is going to get triggered. Okay, and then I almost forgot, but if I select the file image view, I have to go to that one setting to enable user interaction. If I don't, this will not work. Okay, so at this point what we have is this file image view has a gesture recognizer. It's a pan gesture recognizer, and it's going to trigger our handle pan function. So if I go ahead and run this, you'll see that it's panning, but nothing's moving around, right? So it is triggering our function, but I have to manually implement the code to handle the panning. So some of that we've already done, so I'm going to go back over to our view controller, and I had that function, handle pan. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this code, and I'm going to bring it over, and we can see what code's the same and what code's not. So our pan view is coming from the sender.view. That should be okay. The translation should be okay. So I think everything is okay, except the ended is going to be a problem because we're not looking if things are intersecting anymore. Okay, but we may just want to take our pan view and snap it back every time. Okay, so every time we're just going to snap it back. We don't have the origin anymore. So let's go ahead and set up the origin again. So I need a variable, which will be my file image view origin, which is going to be a CG point. And the way we're going to get that origin is we're going to say the file image view origin is equal to, and again, we have to get the origin of our file image view dot frame dot origin. So now we have that file image view origin, and we can use that to snap back. Okay, so if I run this, now there is no trash can involved or anything like that, but we should be able to drag and drop the image, and every time I let go, the end is going to trigger, and that image is going to snap back over a half a second. Okay, I want to implement another gesture recognizer. This one's going to be a little bit different. I want to implement a pinch gesture recognizer. So I have pan gesture recognizer, that's fine. But what I want to do is I want to handle a pinch gesture recognizer, and I want to apply it to that image as well. So I'm going to go over to the storyboard. I'm going to look for the pinch gesture recognizer. I want that associated with this image view again, so I'm just going to drop it here. So I have that pinch gesture recognizer. If I try to control drag this pinch gesture recognizer over to our view controller, you'll notice that there is no actions that it can trigger. I have not set one up. So it can't trigger anything regarding pinch. Okay, I have to set that up. So I can have another IB action here. So handle pinch. I'm going to get a sender again, and it's going to be a UI pinch gesture recognizer. Okay, and again, I'm just going to type in print pinching. Okay, so we can see that that function's getting triggered. In order for that function to get triggered, I have to set it up so that we're on the pinch gesture recognizer. I'm going to control drag to the view controller, and now you can see handle pinch with sender. So now that function is what's going to get triggered when we try to pinch. Okay, so now if I go ahead and run this, okay, and I want to pinch. So the way I'm going to pinch is I hold down the Option key, and you can see these two circles here that are supposed to represent your fingers, and I'm just holding down the Option key, and I get them as close as I want. So my image is kind of small, so I can pinch in or out. I want to be able to pinch out, so I'm making sure that the circles are fairly close to each other. I have the Option key held down, and now I'm pressing the Shift key as well as the Option key. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to move those circles, which represent my fingers, around the screen. So now they're on my actual file. And now if I click and drag, so I'm clicking and dragging on my touchpad, that's representing me pinching. Okay, and you'll notice that I'm getting that pinch action. So it's triggering the function that I expect it to trigger. Okay, which is this pinching, handle pinch function is getting triggered. Okay, so what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to zoom in and out when we pinch. If we're pinching in, we're zooming, we're making the image smaller. If we're pinching out, we're making the image bigger. Okay, so we're going to be able to pinch in and out to scale the image. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to get pinch view. So let pinch view equal sender.view. And again, we have that view, so I'm going to grab it. And what I want to do is I want to take that pinch view and I want to transform it, and I want it scaled by X and Y coordinates. So I want the X scaled by the sender.scale and the Y scaled by sender.scale. And then I'm going to reset the sender scale. So I'm going to reset the pinch view scale back down to 1, to its original state. Okay, so now if I run this, what I should be able to do is I'm holding down the Option key. The circles are right next to each other, which is where I want them. I'm going to move the circles so they're on top of the image. So I'm holding down the Shift key now so that I can move my cursor to where I want it to be. And now you'll see they're centered inside the image. I've let go of the Shift key, and now I can click and drag out. And I'm not getting the pinch. Why am I not getting the pinch? I did this wrong. I want this file image view scaled, not the pinch view. So I want my file image view transformed equal to this transformation. I think that should work. Okay, again, holding down the Option key, then the Shift key to move them, centering over the file image view. I let go of the Shift key, and now I'm going to Control drag out, and you can see that I'm scaling the image bigger. And then if I keep the Option key depressed, I can bring those circles back together, and it'll scale back down. Okay, again, I can do that as many times as I want. So now I need them pretty close to each other, and I can drag them out to make it bigger or smaller, and I can zoom in and out. Okay, and I may decide that I don't want the scale to change so much, or I might want to keep track of the scale. So maybe I say, the minimum zoom scale is half the original size, and the maximum zoom scale is 10x, but I'm in charge of that. I also still have the pan gesture recognizer available. And even if I scale this so that it's smaller, I can still drag it around. And I can make it bigger. And I can drag it around. Okay, the last gesture recognizer I want to look at in this example is I want to look at the rotation gesture recognizer. So I want to be able to rotate that image around. So if I go back over to the storyboard and I'm looking at the second view controller, I'm going to go ahead and look for the rotation gesture recognizer. I'm going to drag it and drop it onto my file image again. So if I look at my file image, you can see that there's 3 different gesture recognizers attached to it. There's the pan, the pinch, and the rotation gesture recognizer. Okay, so the rotation gesture recognizer, the way this is going to work is I need a function that's going to handle the rotation call. So I'm going to go over to my view controller, and I'm going to set up another IB action called handle rotation. It's going to get a sender, which is going to be a UI rotation gesture recognizer. And I can wire this function up. So I'm going to print rotating, just so we can see it in action. And I'm going to wire that gesture recognizer up. So this rotation gesture recognizer is going to be wired up to the view controller. And you can see there's an action available for me to choose. So now what you'll notice is if I try to run this, I can grab onto the edge. I can't remember how to grab onto the edge. There's a way to grab onto the edge so I can rotate this, but you'll see that I'm not getting the rotation gesture recognizer. I'm going to have to Google search the rotation gesture. Rotation gesture simulator. Okay, so that doesn't look promising. It didn't have the rotation gesture. So I'm just going back. I'm looking for the rotation gesture recognizer, so I think I just have to have that pinch gesture recognizer. So I'm holding down the Option key and getting them on top, and then if I rotate them, you'll see that I'm getting the rotation gesture recognizer. So it's just a matter of how was I actually implementing that rotation within my simulator. Okay, so we are able to trigger it, and the way we want to trigger this then is if I want to handle the rotation, I'm going to have my rotation view, again from my sender.view. And then what I want to do is I want to take that file image view and I want to transform it using my my rotation view, and I want to transform that by rotating by the sender's rotation. And then once I've done that, I have to reset the sender's rotation back to 0. Okay, so if I've done this correctly, which I think I have, what'll end up happening is I can zoom in or zoom out on this image. So if I hold down the Option key, I can zoom in or out. Okay, and then if I do that same gesture, except this time instead of moving it in and out, I circle around, you'll see that I'm able to rotate that image. Okay, and I can rotate it back to kind of its original state, hopefully. Somewhere around there. And that rotation gesture recognizer is what's getting called. Okay, and the idea here with all these gesture recognizers is I can do this either through Interface Builder or programmatically. Okay, so the one programmatic example that we used to add this gesture recognizer was our original example, and that's in the viewcontroller.swift file, where we're handling the pan programmatically. We add this pan gesture, and we're basically saying that our image view should have a pan gesture, and we're setting it up, and then we set up the selector, which is going to be the function that should get triggered as we're panning around. So that's all set up programmatically. But then the function that actually does get triggered is essentially going to be the same regardless of whether I set it up programmatically or through Interface Builder. Okay, so those functions and the actual process of handling what should happen as that gesture recognizer occurs is going to be the same regardless of how we set up the gesture recognizer. Okay, the one other key point that I want to make before I end this screencast is make sure that when you have your image that you have user interaction enabled. If you don't, this will not work, and you'll be wondering, why is my gesture recognizer not working? I do this all the time where I forget to enable user interaction, and it's just an easy thing to forget, and I'm like, why is this not getting triggered and why is this not working? User interaction has to be enabled in order for this to work. Okay, so I want to stop here with gesture recognizers, and I will post the source code for you along with the screencast.